Thank you, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. Malaysia was 3% of our donations, so it's wonderful to come to the source in a very real way and put faces to the names that I saw over time. I want to tell you today about a simple idea that's not easy to do, and it's a way that people can help in times of crisis effectively and in a long-term support manner that helps people get back on their feet after something that just wipes out the life they knew. I'd never done anything like this before, and I think we learned some important lessons that everybody would do well to think about ahead of time to make them more effective in a time of crisis. It was last year on March 11th, 2011, that Japan, a nation known for earthquakes, was struck by the largest earthquake in its history, and this was a heck of an earthquake. Magnitude 9.0 undersea created 40-meter tsunami waves that went as far as 10 kilometers inland. And on top of all that, as if it weren't enough, we had level 7 nuclear meltdowns in Fukushima. It was just everything you can imagine hitting the country at once. I was working in my office that morning. It was a Friday, like any other morning, getting ready for weekend work to look at the markets. And I could feel this earthquake coming. I've been in earthquakes. Every week there are earthquakes in Japan. Usually you're sitting at your desk, you're talking on the phone, you're typing away, you shake around a little bit, you don't even stop. You just keep going. It's completely normal in Japan. But this one was different. Have you ever been in the mountains and you could hear the wind coming through the trees? And it starts up at the top and it's blowing about like that, and you can feel it coming closer, and then it turns into and then it gets closer still, and it's a and you know it's just about to hit you. Imagine that same concept, but instead of wind, it's the roar of the earth itself coming through the ground. Never heard anything like it. It was, my goodness, something big is coming. And the roar hit, and the whole building, the whole neighborhood, the whole land began to shake like you wouldn't believe. I have large windows on the first floor, and I could see out to the city buildings and the neighborhoods in the foreground. And it was as if the entire ground had gone liquid, and the buildings were surfing on dirt. It wasn't just shaking. Everything had gone liquid and was moving around. And it lasted for well over 30 seconds, 45 seconds, which is a long time when buildings are surfing on dirt. It sounds like a short time in normal life, but it's a long time in that situation. The lights went out, power went dead, phones went blank, internet went down, everything shut down. People slowly came out of the buildings with hard hats on to talk about what had happened, what's going on. We didn't know. We didn't know what had happened up north. All we knew was, got to figure out how to get gasoline for the car, got to figure out how to get food from the grocery store. Me, what can we do to get through that? Wow, that was a little bit more than a usual kitchen rattler. The next day, the lights came back up, the internet came up, and we were met with scenes of destruction that you just probably see once in a lifetime, let's hope. It was called Warzone Japan 2011. It looked very much like the firebombing of Dresden or even Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the nuclear bombs. Just absolute devastation. The water that came in swirled around, turning steel girders into bent wires, it looked like, turning houses into piles of shattered chopsticks. More than 1 million buildings were affected by this, and half of those were wiped out entirely. We say affected, the building's just not there anymore. Absolute devastation. This silence went over the land, and a silence went over the world. You can probably remember that weekend, and you had coverage all through it. But in Japan, on the ground, right there, not even the epicenter, but on the edge of that disaster zone, we just took a breath, and are you seeing this? And these are places we've been. These are people we've met. These are oceans we've swum in before. And we had to do something. You cannot be that close to this kind of scene without doing something. We have to get in there and do something. Now, we quickly sat down and got logical about it. We are an investment operation. We do things logically. We do things effectively. How can we be effective in this case? Because there's a tendency to panic. My gosh, look at that. We've got to get up there. We've got to do something, anything, right? That's the first thought that comes to mind, anything. But when you study disaster relief literature, which we did in a very packed 36-hour session, you find that that's the amateur mistake. We've got to do anything, send what you have, used stuff, junk, whatever you have, send it here, we'll put it on a truck, we'll drive it up there, we'll dump it right at the entrance to the shelter. That doesn't work. You end up with piles of junk all over an area that's already turned to junk. Nobody has time to sort through that. Nobody knows what they need. They're just wiped out. You've got to be more effective. When the internet came back up, the world got in touch. Are you guys okay? What can we do? What's the situation over there? And we felt that compassion from the group. And on the other side, we saw the devastation in Tohoku, that part of Japan, and we thought, how can we bring these groups together? That's all we need to do, bring these two groups together. And that was the simple kickoff for this idea. People need socks. They always forget socks. If a wave is coming at your house, you bolt out of the house with whatever you're wearing. You don't think to grab socks. Maybe the cat, maybe your phone, something like that, but not a pair of socks. So people after disasters often say, we needed socks. Our socks were so grimy after about a day. Socks work. They're available anywhere in the world. They're cheap. They're easy to send. They don't go bad. They don't break. Perfect. What else can we do with that? We need to put a care letter in there so people get compassion. Because think about it, very quickly, the thing people need as support is not another piece of clothing, not another item. They need emotional support. Because very quickly, the government, non-governmental organizations have the shelter, they have the mat, they have the food, they have a blanket for the people, and that's it. Checked off, you're taken care of. Really? You're sitting on a mat with 2,000 strangers, your house is wiped out, your car is gone, 3 of your family members are missing. What's your future? So the goods are supplied, but where's the compassion? So we wanted to make it a care package, an item that's really needed, not just a trinket, an item that's needed with a letter from somebody they could contact later if they'd like, a friend in the darkness, and in a sealed bag, which is also a needed item in these disaster shelters. That was the simple message. We had to spark it off. We created a website, and we created a Facebook page, and the website is where most of the activity was, actually. People could see what we were doing, how we were doing it, find out how to participate, follow these simple directions to send us exactly what we needed so we could quickly get this to the people, connect the two groups, the compassionate citizens of the planet with the devastated citizens of Tohoku. We rented this, we didn't rent, we borrowed this vacant accounting office, and it looked like that, totally empty to begin with, and the packages began trickling in. The trickle turned into a deluge. People inappropriately called it a tsunami of packages. And we did receive that tsunami of packages, and we worked our way through those very effectively. We had 40 people on the ground in Sano that worked shifts, actually clocked in, kept track of their hours, worked this sorting through them. The amount of love put into these packages was very overwhelming, just so moving. People would put in little wonderfully handwritten letters, wonderfully chosen socks, not bulk 500 pair of thin socks in a box, carefully chosen high-quality socks that you would love to receive, the kind of socks you can't wait to put on to snuggle into as you're feeling wiped out. And we told people, don't feel the need to save the entire village. You do your one small part well, the other thousands of people participating will do their small part well. Together, every single package will have meaning. Don't feel the need to send 1,000 pretty good socks. Send 20 excellent pairs of socks with a handwritten letter that is going to change the course of somebody's day. That's the goal. And that's what came, and it was very moving to see. Our system was to pack them 100 per to these clear bags in only 5 categories: men, women, boys, girls, babies. That's it. We didn't do granular sizes. You're a man, you get a man's sock. You're a woman, you get a woman's sock. That's about as close as we got. We could do colors sometimes, but it just depended on the bag of the day. And people were open to that. They knew they weren't shopping that day, right? So we'd pack them up like this. We'd load them up to the door. We knew exactly how many we were taking, because always 100 per bag, remember, very efficient. Load up the van. We could get 12,000 at a time in this van, which Toyota gave us at a very good rate. Not free, but a very good rate. And we were able to get that up into the disaster zone with 12,000 pairs of socks per day. And we'd get them all out, almost always. Not always, but almost always get them all out. And the disaster zone was unbelievable. This is how people were living, sometimes 2,000 in a shelter, surrounded by strangers. And we would get in there and spend time with them to hand them the socks, tell them where they were from, ask them how they were doing, and listen to their stories and what stories we heard. I remember this one family in a place called Yamamoto. The daughter was home, the only one at home when the wave came, and it came barreling from the sea, and she had to run out right away, and she did. She ran up the street, and she remembered partway up the street that she forgot the dog, so she ran back to get the dog, and she just barely got the dog. With the water lapping at her heels, ran up the hill to where she ended up staying in the shelter. After the whole neighborhood was wiped out, really wiped out, just acres and acres of wreckage, the family went down a couple days later to try to find the house. What was left of the house? Is there anything we might recover? A photo album, something that means something to our family. They crawled through the wreckage over the houses that used to be there, and they couldn't find their own house. All the landmarks were gone. It was just a flat field covered with rubble now. Couldn't find the house. On their way back, about 3 kilometers away from where they think they used to live, the daughter looks down and sees a sparkle in the dirt, and it's their house key. Their house key, not a house key, their house key on the keychain. They found their key, but not the house. From there, we went on to work outside the shelters, distributing directly from our van. And the demand stayed high for a long time. This is one example of that. This is the end of a very long line, and you can see that blue tarp up there. This is the same blue tarp. Our van is not until way up here. That was typical of the kind of turnout we would get at these places, and we sometimes couldn't get through the whole line. Even with 12,000 socks in there, we'd have to say to people, we don't have enough today, I'm so sorry. And the Japanese are so polite, they'd fold up their bags and say, that's okay, please come back another time if you can. And you can be sure we did. From there, we went to temporary housing, which is not so temporary. They're probably going to live there for 7 years, and this was what it looks like. We distributed from vans and also door to door because many people were too depressed to leave their homes. So we would go door to door and take them socks. And finally, we had a phase where we would go to schools. That was where the kids ended up quite quickly. They tried to get the kids back on track so they wouldn't keep stewing over this devastation that came their way. And we would go to schools and try to create these happy, lively events where the kids could connect. Total number of socks distributed, care packages, 160,000 from all around the world, touching these people. Now, was it any good? Did it do any good? People ask that a lot. And there were many times when it doesn't feel like it does any good. You would be amazed at how few Hollywood moments there are in this line of work. There's a tendency to think of disaster crisis volunteering as this soft light, up music moment where the survivor comes together with the hero riding in to help out, and it's touching, touching, touching all around. Put that out of your mind because that happens, but not very often. It's a lot of long, hard work and a lot of discouraging moments where people will tell you, you can't come in here to help these people. You can't distribute those socks to these people. You wouldn't believe how much that happened, but you have to keep going. You have to keep connecting those two groups we talked about. This is a place where we were turned away. We had a reservation to distribute directly to these people. There are 2,000 survivors here. And this one man, the actual man himself right up there, decided that the shelter's rule of no direct distributions was more important than the 2,500 pairs of socks we had sitting in the van. Last stop of the day, we're there at 7 p.m., just after dinner, people are ready to get socks. Nope, we've got a rule. Can't do that here. Move on. I said, are you understanding this situation? We have socks from around the world that were hand packaged for these people in 5 different sizes. You have 2,000 people in there that need these socks. They've been through this, and you think a rule that says we can't bring them in there is more important than connecting these two groups? Sorry, rules are rules. Well, not to us they weren't. And 2 hours later of the non-Hollywood moment, a lot of just gritty fighting to get our way in there, we finally did get in there. 2,000 people lined up just like that. And they got their socks, and it made their evening, we like to think. And you have to keep going even at those times when it seems like the world doesn't support at all what you're doing. But remember those two groups, the people who care and the people who need to be cared for. Those were our clients, is the way we looked at it. That's who we represented. That's where we got strength. Picture those thousands of faces from Malaysia to Europe to Africa to the United States. That's who sent these, from wherever they're from, and these are the people that need them. And you've got to keep that in mind during those times. We heard a story in one of the shelters of a mother whose daughter was in kindergarten that morning down by the sea. Of course, all the mothers got the news right up front. The tsunami is coming, the tsunami is coming. They all had the same idea. Get to that kindergarten, get the children. But because they all went at the same time, they jammed the small road that goes down to where it is. Can you imagine? You're caught in this traffic jam of mothers trying to get to their babies, and the wave is coming behind the school. Most of the mothers were killed in their cars, and most of the children were killed as the teachers ran away holding their hands. Kumiko's daughter, Rie, is the story we heard about. The teacher had her hand in the right and another girl's hand in the left and was running from the wave, and it overtook them. And the teacher tried to hold on but lost hold of both of the children, and they were never seen again. And she told us that story and asked if she could have a pair of children's socks. She got them. I want to tell you about another story of how we do hear back from people and we find out that we have done some good. And this is motivation to keep helping you in the future. This is a girl named Reina, a woman named Reina who lives in Miyagi. And this is a letter she sent back to the Girl Scout troop that sent her socks. And I'd like to read it to you. The charming, unaccomplished English gives a sort of childlike charm to it that makes it so much more real. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Reina. I live in Onagawa town in Miyagi, Japan. My family received the disaster on March 11th. I lived in the close vicinity of the sea. The houses collapsed by the tsunami. It was lucky, and the family who lived together was safe. However, the grandfather is missing still. Socks were gotten on June 4th. Volunteers people brought it. Volunteers' name is Socks for Japan. I was glad because in Miyagi Prefecture there was still a cold day, too, and it was impressed by the geniality of people in the world. I can meet you through Socks for Japan and is happy. Thank you very, very much. That's one of thousands that came back, showing the need to keep pressing with this important work. And I want to close with one more story. It's the story of the nameless boy who became our mascot in a way that we never intended to have happen. We met him in the Watanoha area of Ishinomaki, and this is an article that I wrote about it that you can still read on the website, and I'm going to read to you just the paragraph that applies to this boy to show you the kind of people you're helping in these times. When we worked our way through about half the crowd, a quiet boy with scratches and cuts on his face pushed to the front. He tapped my arm and asked, "Is it okay if I just sit next to your van? I won't make any trouble. I just want to sit next to it." I said, "Sure." He pulled over an orange crate and sat with his head bowed with no further explanation. We kept distributing socks to the crowd until everybody was gone. Still the boy sat. "Would you like some socks?" I asked. He said yes and took 2 plain white pairs from the bag I held open to him, a most humble choice. "How about more for your family?" I offered. He shook his head and began to cry, and I guessed that the reason he didn't need more socks. I tried talking to him, but he didn't want to talk. He said I could take a picture of him, but not of his face. I never found out what happened to his family or why he wanted to sit by the van. Maybe his father once had a similar van. Maybe his mother used to drive him and his siblings around town in a similar van. We'll never know. Eventually we needed to leave, and all I have left of that boy is my memory of his quavering voice and the photo he allowed me to take. That's him. In times of crisis, there are people that really need the help of the world, and there are people around the world that really want to help. I think one of the simplest things we can do that is not easy but simple is to connect those groups. Do your one part and do it well, and everybody's involvement creates a most meaningful effort to help this group of people get back on their feet in good socks and move on with a future that helps. So thank you on behalf of all of us at Socks for Japan and of the survivors. Thank you very much.